Who you got for cut candidates?
Joe Mixon. Joe Mixon is the first name that I think is an intriguing potential cut candidate because Joe Mixon is on a ton of money and they save $7 million against the cap by cutting him. I think there's a chance that happens. Because remember, we're talking the Bengals, they're not in cap hell or anything like that, but they have a very clear line of sight about where a ton of their money is about to go. Joe Burrow, T. Higgins, Jamar Chase. If you're putting money there, and they should, you got to get rid of it somewhere, and Joe Mixon's a fairly obvious place to get rid of it.
Joe Mixon makes a ton of sense as a cut candidate. If he ends up as a free agent here, what a fascinating offseason, right? The strongest position, position for position here, the strongest position in free agency might be running back. The strongest position in the draft might be running back. And then you're talking about maybe adding Joe Mixon to the mix and all that stuff, right? So just pure, stacking players at the position. There's a plethora of running backs available this offseason, right? The Giants have to make a decision on Saquon Barkley, and they want him back. And then throw Mixon in there. It's a good runner.
And it's a great draft for running backs.
That's what I said that,
yeah. So you've got a pretty good health.
Might be the strongest position in free agency and in the draft this offseason in a year that, as we de-emphasize the position.
And P. Ryan has, if anything, outperformed Mixon at times this year. Like when they put him in and leaned on him, he was actually making more plays. I wouldn't lean too heavily on that as a data point, but from an internal point of view, and you're looking at this, like it's just another way of highlighting how much it isn't the running back that's driving that kind of thing, right? That, hey, look, if nothing else, there wasn't an obvious upgrade when Mixon was there versus P. Ryan.
Yeah, when the Bengals went from, so halfway through the Super Bowl season, the Bengals turned into Joe Burrow's team, right? They had games early in that year where Joe Burrow was throwing the ball only 20, 22, 25 times. They completely changed. It became a pass-first team. And Mixon had some big games, like he ran all over the Panthers and all that stuff. But the running back in the Bengals offense, the same way the running back in the Chiefs offense is going to be the guy they're going to get touchdowns because they're going to have opportunities. But I think the Bengals are going to continue to want to have dynamic pass catchers coming out of the backfield and have more, committee type approaches, keep that position cheap because, they do need to pay Burrow and they need to pay at least one of those two receivers in the coming year. So Joe Mixon makes sense. And then it's like, all right, do any of these guys make sense? Like, are there any teams that are going to be falling all over themselves to get a free agent running back? Josh Jacobs, Saquon Barkley, Joe Mixon potentially. I don't know.
Couple more candidates that kind of caught my eye. Shaq Griffin in Jacksonville. That's a $13+ million saving against the cap if they cut him. Frank Clark, Super Bowl playoff hero and yet otherwise inadequate pass rusher for the Kansas City Chiefs. $21 million in savings if they get rid of Frank. And then here's
Frank Clark felt inevitable whenever the savings matched up properly.
Yes.
Which is where we're at right now.
Here's the really interesting one, though. Eric Kendricks, coming off a really bad year for Minnesota in that defense. Over $9 million in saving if they get rid of Eric Kendricks. Eric Kendricks is a year essentially removed from being a really top-end linebacker, has a track record of being an excellent coverage linebacker. Number one, obviously Minnesota is now changing scheme dramatically. Like they're shifting from Ed Donatell's off-coverage zone system to presumably Brian Flores' full New England-style man coverage aggression type of stuff. And Eric Kendricks is A, coming off a crappy year, B, is now the wrong side of 30, and obviously C is over $9 million worth of saving for him. That's one I hadn't even considered until I saw it on the list, but that makes a lot of sense and would be a pretty big kind of shockwave, I think, if Eric Kendricks got cut.
You see the 65 pass rush grade there, and Kendricks is always, the majority of his career, right? Linebacker grades and production tend to fluctuate just a little bit, but he's been one of the better coverage linebackers. Excellent coverage grades from 2016 to 21, but almost always in a zone-heavy scheme. And what we've seen from a grading standpoint, the zone-heavy schemes are actually more challenging for linebackers, right? We talk about how much they're put into a bind and all that stuff. So Kendricks has been very good in a difficult role, but he's never really been a great blitzer necessarily. That is exactly what Flores' scheme, again, if he keeps the same Patriots tree type of deal, more man coverage, that means your linebackers have to play some man coverage, but then the other linebacker is also blitzing a lot, right? So it's blitz and man a little bit more than just, dropping back into zone. So you might be looking for a completely different prototype there in Minnesota. So that does make a little bit of sense there.
Do you have any?
I did not add any to your list there. Where's Brad's article here? I had it pulled up. Don't put me on the spot like that.
You suggested like you were about to get some ready, and then apparently didn't.
No, I did for draft mistakes.
Oh, I see. Okay, sorry.
I think Derek Carr.
Derek Carr's a
Raiders.
good cut candidate.
Could be a cut candidate.
Yes.
I wanted to add a trade candidate in here.
Okay.
So we've heard DeAndre Hopkins, right?
Uh-huh.
And if I'm going to keep saying, well, if you're gonna copy the rest of the league and try to go get your wide receiver one via trade, just get your wide receiver one. However you do it, it's going to have to be via trade. DeAndre Hopkins is out there. I've been using Mike Evans as a potential trade candidate.
Yep.
In various radio interviews and stuff like that. Could Mike Evans, if the Bucs decide to rebuild, could Mike Evans be available via trade? They would have to take a huge cap hit this year, $21 million, but they're already taking a huge cap hit on Tom Brady. Much like we've seen teams set records for dead money. The Falcons, last year they were just like, just do it all. Julio, Matt Ryan, just do it all in 1 year, and then we'll come out of it next year. If the Bucs decide to do that, maybe Mike Evans is maybe the top guy, maybe higher than Nuke Hopkins out there.
Maybe.
Out there.
Speaking of things Steve's going to say all offseason. Mike Evans might be available by trade.
Yeah.
That's just, it's one of your things.
It is. Keep track of those things I keep saying.
The Falcons ate so much dead money for Matt Ryan that if the Colts cut Matt Ryan, it's going to be like $18 million in dead money. That's how bad.
Just for the Colts?
That's how hard that hit was for Atlanta, that a year later, it's still like a $20 million hit.
Calvin Ridley's applying for reinstatement.
Yeah.
Right now.
A year later. I mean, it's the last day he can apply, I think. So, yeah.
Another interesting one here, though, is David Bakhtiari is on Brad's list here, left tackle for the Packers.
Mm-hmm.
$23 million in dead money, but almost $6 million in cap savings. He's been battling injuries the last couple of years, barely on the field.
And Zach Tom did really well as a rookie left tackle when he came in to spell him.
They've just done a great job developing linemen in general.
That's a difficult one because I think Bakhtiari is still as good as any left tackle in the NFL, certainly from a pass blocking point of view. Whether or not they're going to go with Rodgers or Jordan Love, it feels like you want to have the best left tackle available. That would be a big call to be like, we'll get rid of him for a little bit of a saving and, the guarantee that we're going to have a healthy guy, relative guarantee, and install Zach Tom as the starting left tackle. Maybe, but that feels very, very risky.
So I'll add one more to the mix then. Byron Jones is on Brad's list here, cornerback from Miami. We saw him go to the Dolphins just before the 2020 season, signed a massive contract, didn't play a snap in 2022, really underwhelmed in 2 years. He was decent coverage grade, but again, he went to the Flores system where he's playing a ton of man coverage. It's a little bit more challenging. So he's a good, solid cornerback who was on a massive contract, over $16 million per year. And Byron Jones, you'd still have a dead cap hit there. But Miami, after big investment in both Byron Jones and Xavier Howard at cornerback, could they move on from Byron Jones? If he hits the market, perhaps reuniting with Flores in Minnesota could make sense scheme-wise. I don't know. But didn't play a snap this year. Number 25 in WAR in 2021. He's a good corner, but probably not worth $16 million plus.
Yep.
That he's been making.